Thucydides is regarded as the second great Greek historian after Herodotus. He was an Athenian general who fought in the conflict known as the Peloponnesian War that took place between the coalition led by the Athenians and that led by the Spartans. This was an extended struggle that lasted from 431 to 404 BC and engulfed the entire Greek world. Thucydides' great work is a history of this war. He portrays this as a clash between two different worldviews and ways of life. The Athenians, with their democracy and equality, pitted against the Spartans with their oligarchy and aristocracy. Thucydides himself provides only the briefest of information about himself, and these few remarks remain our most reliable information about his life. He was born in Athens, presumably around 460 BC. His family had connections to the nobility in Thrace in northeastern Greece, where it owned a rich estate that included gold mines. Thucydides says that he contracted the plague that he describes as ravaging Athens when it was under siege. Later, in 424 BC, he was made general and sent to the island of Thasos off the Thracian mainland, presumably due to his family connections there. He led an expedition to try to save Amphipolis from being taken by the Spartans, but he arrived too late and the town was already in Spartan hands. The loss of Amphipolis was a serious blow for Athens, and Thucydides was blamed for failing to come to its aid in time. As a result, the Athenians voted to condemn him to exile. Thus relieved of his command, he was able to research and write his history. Since he had been exiled by the Athenians, he could freely travel to the member states of the Spartan Confederacy. This allowed him to speak to people involved in both sides of the conflict and to portray the events of the war from a broader perspective instead of just giving the Athenian take on things. He seems to have dedicated the rest of his life to the project of writing his history. When he was not traveling, he lived on his family estate, which obviated the need for making a living. He was probably allowed to return to Athens at the end of the war. He's thought to have died sometime around 400 BC, but the circumstances surrounding his death are uncertain, although the later Greek writers Pausanias and Plutarch say that he was murdered before he could return to Athens. At any rate, he seems to have died before he finished the history, given the fact that it ends very abruptly in medias res, and the account of the last 7 years of the war is missing. The text that we know as the history of the Peloponnesian War is apparently not all from the hand of Thucydides himself. Scholars have pointed out that there's a serious structural break in Book 5, which is followed by what is referred to as the second preface. Here, what appears to be a second author refers to Thucydides' work. We've seen in some of our other readings that in the ancient world, the integrity of the text was not respected, and later scribes and authors had no scruples about editing, correcting, or adding on to a written text by another writer. Thucydides' history seems to have been a victim of this. In his narrative, at the end of each year of the war, Thucydides, in a sense, signs his own name to finish that section of the text. For example, Book 4 closes with the words, quote, "So ended the winter in the 9th year of the war, of which Thucydides is the historian." This signature fails to appear in Book 5, chapters 1 to 83, the part of the text that includes the second preface. It's thus clear that this section of text is an addition by a later writer. It's been argued that the historian Xenophon is responsible for this addition and that he edited parts of Thucydides' text. Thus, on this view, the second preface is by Xenophon as editor, and it's thought that Thucydides left the account of the years 19 to 21 of the war unfinished. This material was cobbled together from his drafts by Xenophon or another editor. Thus, what appears today as most of Book 7 and all of Book 8 were never known to Thucydides as such. The war that Thucydides narrates pits the two great city-states, Athens and Sparta, against each other. In the wake of the Persian Wars, Athens grew in power and prestige. It became the leader in the Delian League, which was a confederation of Greek states allied for the purpose of common protection against any future Persian threat. The League contained hundreds of member Greek states from the Greek mainland and the islands, as well as the entire coast of Asia Minor. Its territory covered the entire Aegean Sea and even beyond. As Athens came more and more to regard the League as an organ of its own personal interests, they alienated some of the allies. The expansion of Athenian power was alarming to the Spartans and their allies in the so-called Peloponnesian League, and according to Thucydides, this was the immediate cause of the conflict. The war took place on sea and on land and had numerous flashpoints over a 27-year period. In the end, Sparta prevailed and Athens was defeated. Thucydides' account of the war represents a major work in the development of history as a scholarly field. But it's also been of great interest to scholars in other disciplines such as political science. The English social political philosopher Thomas Hobbes published a translation of the work in 1629, but this failed to garner significant scholarly attention. Thucydides is often taken to be an exponent of Realpolitik, or the school of political realism, although he's not among the most frequently read classical authors of the Renaissance. Thucydides became popular among German thinkers of the 19th century. He was revered by philosophers such as Friedrich Schelling and Friedrich Nietzsche, and by historians such as Edward Meyer and Leopold von Ranke.